It is everybody's favorite time. It's time for Patchnotes. Yes, we're going to be talking about Patchnotes in Dev Diary 86 today, and it's going to be amazing. It's going to probably one of the better ones in terms of patch notes that we've had for Stellaris. So, without further ado, let's get in, shall we? The patch notes version 1.8.0. I'm sure we'll be updating to 1.8.1 sooner or later when somebody managed to find a absolutely game-breaking situation. Regardless, expansion features for Synthetic Dawn, Machine Empires. Added the ability to play as a machine empire, a robotic hive mind that has overthrown or supplanted its creators, with its own government authority, building civics traditions, and unique gameplay features. That sounds hot. Add Rogue Servitors, a special civic for machine empires where biological pops are kept as bio-trophies and cared for in special sanctuaries, generating unity and boosting influence gain and resource production across the whole empire. That's actually kind of cool. We'll take a look at that once that comes out. Obviously, this is part of Synthetic Dawn. Added Determined Exterminator, a special civic of an empire that grants substantial combat bonuses and rewards for purging biological pops. It prohibits diplomacy or coexistence with any biological empires. It can apparently coexist with the technological empires anyway, but in general, this seems to be pretty good. Apparently, it's not as strong as Fanatical Purifiers, but maybe you'll be able to mix and match a little bit. Added Driven Assimilator, a special civic for machine empires that grants the ability to assimilate biological pops into the machine hive mind as cyborg workers. We are the Borg, basically. Added Fallen Machine Empires, old and unpredictable AI civilizations with special interactions for both biological and synthetic empires. Something about a whole bunch of new stuff has been added in that particular category. We'll take a look at that once that comes out. Added Machine Uprisings, an event chain where synths that have not been given citizen rights may start to network and eventually rebel, forming a new empire that attempts to overthrow their organic masters. And for a mere, I believe it's 400 energy, you can play as them. So basically you can swap to those robots. Portraits, added 8 new robot portraits. Originally there were supposed to be 12, but apparently they wanted to spend more time on fleshing out 8 instead for better quality. Based on every single species subclass, empires will have a robot portrait suited to their species class by default. Reptilian robots for reptilians, etc. Synthetic Dawn adds 10 new voice packs for the Advisor based on government and ethics, which voice is used during Empire creation. It's changed at any time in the in-game government screen. We'll take a look at that as well once it comes out. Added 3 new songs, including a new main theme. Game setup. Synthetic Dawn added the ability to customize your secondary species for Simulator, Rogue Servitor, and biological empires with a syncretic evolution. So you'll be able to do more stuff with a syncretic evolution. Cool. Added to the Shared Destiny Ascension perk, which gives a 50% cost reduction on integrated subjects. That's actually really nice. Whether or not that it's the cost of time or the cost of influence is a whole different question. Added Machine World Ascension perks for machine empires. Allow planet to be terraformed into a special machine world class. We'll take a look at what sort of bonuses that has once it comes out. Synthetic Dawn Utopia, so this is a little bit of overlap for the previous one as well. Added Synthetic Age Ascension for machine empires, giving +2 machine trait points. It's interesting, and a 33% cost reduction on robo-modding. Basically, your the genetic engineering equivalent of basically, yeah, the equivalent with robots is going to be robo-modding, and we'll be doing a video about that as well, of course. Species Right added a simulation citizenship that allows synthetically ascended empires and biologically ascended hive minds to assimilate pops. Added de-assimilation citizen type that allows for biologically ascended empires to give hive minds pops individually, so now they will not automatically die. Added new pre-scripted empires using Synthetic Dawn, Utopia, and Plantoids. Thankfully, I've got all of those. Plantoids, by the way, is a pack that is completely focused on aesthetics. It's not a necessary thing to play. Just be aware of that. Nothing about Leviathans, funnily enough, which was the previous story pack, and also the first expansion that came out. Free features. Added 5 new achievements. Cool. I'm not going to get them. I only have one achievement, and that's the new colonization one. Reworked the old AI crisis into the contingency, an ancient and dormant AI that can be awakened by the presence of synthetic pops and will attempt to sterilize the galaxy of intelligent biological life. I like it. We'll take a look at that as well. This is obviously going to replace the AI uprising mechanics video, and we will obviously replace that with the contingency. The release pending, obviously. Rework genetic modification, so there is now a system of templates that can be created, modified, and applied to populations. So you have templating that can be added to any sort of pops, which is nice. Added traits for robotic species and technology that lets you do robo-modding, the equivalent of genetic modification for robopops. So we already talked about this. We'll do a video about that. Reworked tradition trees for hive mind to devouring swarm, fanatic purifiers, and inwards perfection empires to be better suited traditions and a flavor text. Basically, all of these have their own individual trees, which is kind of cool. And that is obviously in traditions. Awakened and fallen empires now start to experience decadence after being awakened for 20 years, who did not love Sword of Islam for decadence. Every month there is a chance that an awakened empire decadence will increase based on how large they have grown and how many empires they have forced to be their subjects. Decadence reduces awakened empires' resource production and ship strength and makes their subjects far more rebellious. That's actually really cool. Awakened empires were already too powerful in the game, so this should be able to curb their strength a little bit. Reworked and blocked numerous events for hive minds where the text or effects did not work well narratively. Apparently, that's part of the important bit. No real mention about how many new events have been added to the game through this package. Species rights added academic privilege to living standard type available to materialists only, similar to probably utopian living standards for the egalitarians. Boost research output and happiness at an increased consumer goods cost. I like this. Like, more stuff to being able to specialize your species is always good. That is the wrong button. Let me quickly pop back into that. My apologies. Oh yeah, here we go. Vassals, diplomacy and subjects. Vassals are now released directly from planet view and can be released from any non-capital planet. That's actually really good. It basically means you can have infinite vassals. I'm looking forward to have a map full of single stars empires that I can throw into the Thunderdome. Game setup. Added galaxy setup to partially randomize the number of empires, advanced starts, and fallen empires. So you can basically hit a button, and if you pick that, then, for instance, if you have 15 empires selected as to be part of your game, when hitting the randomization, it will take something between half that number and that number. So if you take 16, it will be somewhere between 16 and 8. Added galaxy setup option for crisis strength, which replaces the previous galaxy size habitable world scaling. So this does not mean that galaxy size has been removed or habitable world scaling has been removed. It just means that the crisis strength was based on these modifiers, and instead you get this crisis strength, which goes up to a certain number. Added galaxy setup option for a chance of primitive civilizations being generated. So you can have infinite amount of primitive civilizations. I know people that like to play that way by just conquering as many primitives as fast as they can, and that's for a nice dynamic, I believe. Yeah, added special hive mind interactions with the Prothurian Scourge. That's actually really cool. We'll have to take a look at that, how that actually works. Added a new technology, granular acclimination. That's probably not how you pronounce that. That unlocks the ability to modify pop habitability type. That's actually really nice. Policies. Added new policies for the treatment of pre-sapiens. They can be protected, tolerated, and hunted for food or exterminated. So you can basically pre-sapience. They used to be called pre-sentience, I believe, and you could uplift those. Now they are called pre-sentience and sapience even, and they can be protected. So basically with enclaves and stuff like that, tolerated, but you can still move them or hunt them down for food, which is nice. Added an initial border status policy that controls whether or not borders to other empires are automatically closed or automatically open upon first contact. Actually, a pretty big deal. You do not want anybody. This is mostly a deal in multiplayer because the AI knows everything anyway. It just, pretends it doesn't in the normal difficulty modes. But yeah, being able to automatically close your borders is a pretty huge deal and basically allows for information to be confined for a longer period of time. Added robotic worker policy that controls whether or not robot pops are allowed or automatically disassembled. The old AI rights policy is now instead determines the stance towards sapient AI. Interesting. Okay, so basically, whether or not we're going to disassemble robots. Added a land appropriation policy. If enabled, newly acquired planets will have that have less than 5 tiles of free space and are populated by non-citizen species will have some of them removed from their land, fleeing up tiles and potentially creating refugees. That's actually kind of useful. I've had issues in the past where basically my pops, they need more breathing space, Praxis has blown up, we need more breathing space, that sort of situation. Kind of useful for those people that want to make their population the best one in the galaxy. New government civics. The Corvée system civic gives you a minus 50% resettlement cost, which is okay. Normally I think it's 50 or something along those lines. Still pretty decent. Whether it's valuable is a whole different question. Added feudal realm civic. It reduces penalty of relative powers of your subject in half and allows them to colonize outside their borders. This is going to be huge. So your subjects, as in your vassals, will be able to colonize outside their borders actively. Basically, they can grow independently from you, and also the penalty of relative power has been halved, which makes them rebel less. This is actually a pretty big one for those that want to have a core empire and have a bunch of vassals grow around it. That's actually really good. Added a unique government form for devouring swarms. We'll take a look at that once we get there. Added feudal empire and megachurch government forms. Interesting. I should probably do a video on all of these subjects, or at least individually once I get my hands on the story pack. Added a new sacred nexus building for spiritualists with corresponding technology. Cool. So those are all the features from both the patch as well as the expansion. Obviously, everything starting at achievements were free features, unless, of course, those free features apply to, of course, the Synthetic Dawn, which is pretty cool. I would like to point out, by the way, that we're about to go into balance, and after that, we're going to go into bugs, and there are some references that you may find interesting. Balance is there is actually a lot of really important stuff here. Flattened impact of spaceports on naval capacity. So it's the same or higher in the early mid game, but lower in the end game. Basically, spaceports is what generates your naval capacity. So in the late game, you will now get less. I feel a mod for that is going to be incoming very soon. Massively buffed the Dyson Spheres and Science Nexus, but are now restricted to building just one of each. Effectively, you throw the blueprints immediately away. I think the Dyson Sphere will now generate 1,000 energy in the Science Nexus, 750 science of every single one of them. I would not know. I've never built one of them. I've only done a video about them. Replace leader skill modifier with leader max skill modifier that increases the maximum skill cap of a leader instead of simply increases their base skills. So basically what this means is leaders now have 10 skill levels, or can have up to 10 skill levels with a base of 5, which makes them, in certain cases, very, very strong. For instance, if you have robot pops and they are effectively immortal, with a max skill leader set of level 10, you basically have a bunch of demigods. So that is actually a pretty big deal. The effect of food surplus on pop growth is now based on the number of planets that have growing biological population rather than the number of the total pops in the Empire. This should make food more useful for fueling growth in the mid and late game. That's actually really useful. You have a lot of pops in your entire Empire. and having the amount based on the total amount of growth is actually kind of useful. Hard difficulty is now a little bit easier because apparently it was too hard. By the way, it wasn't. Reduce the output of power and food producing buildings. Okay, so power and food now produces less, but made large planetary deposits of these types more common. And we're going to be talking about that a little bit more later. But yeah, power and food producing buildings will now be generating less of both. Interesting. Out of the new very hard difficulty, that is roughly on par with the old hard mode. By the way, old hard mode wasn't hard. Remove the restrictions on interfering with sector planet buildings and pops, so they can be real. Okay, on restrictions on interfering with. Oh, okay. So you can now build stuff in sectors if you want to, or mess with pops in sectors if you want to. That's actually a really big one. I've had a lot of problems in the past where I feel that a sector is not developing properly, and just giving them a nudge in the right direction seems to be helping, but still, this is pretty big. Remove the influence cost for revoking systems from sectors and deleting sectors. Really? Remove the influence cost from revoking systems from sectors and deleting sectors. Okay, so removing sectors is now free. Cool. All right. That's cool. Reworked away. It kind of makes sense actually, because the game does force you to do it, and it forces you to spend influence, and it should be more of a choice if anything. So yeah, space mana is being directed in the right things, like I don't know, rigging democracies and getting new stuff and getting planets. Reworked away the ship targets, the way ships target other ships to be more sticky, so disruptors do not immediately retarget one once enemy shields are down, etc. Basically, this means that any sort of ships in the past, ships that were specialized to one thing would automatically shoot at that specific target. So in this particular case, disruptors would automatically shoot at ships that had their shields up. Basically, you have more firepower being forced on one ship in general. Here is the one that everybody has been waiting for. Major rebalancing done to ship costs. Costs of hull and components have been overhauled to make it so that ships with basic components are no longer the most cost-effective option. The naked corvettes are dead. We're going to make a video about that, guaranteed. Major rebalancing done to weapons to make more types of weapons useful in different situations. Okay. Missiles can now retarget if their target is lost after they are fired. Missiles can always retarget at least once and have a decreasing chance to retarget again after the first time. Hallelujah. Missiles are finally viable. I'm actually really looking forward to test this out. This is going to be great. Habitability no longer caps happiness, but instead reduces happiness for pops and have less than that have less than 100 habitability on planet. All right, cool. Low habitability now reduces pop resource output. I was under the impression that that kind of was the case, only with an additional step due to happiness. Minimum habitability to colonize a planet is now 20%, down from 40. It used to be 60, by the way. So yeah, it's going to suck for whoever is going to live there. And then happiness is going to go low, and then output's going to be awful, so... but for big planets, I guess it's nice. Reduce the number of habitable worlds in the galaxy by about 50% on the default setting. That's the second time they have done this. It's, again, a pretty big deal, but you can crank that up again. The core sector, oh, I love this one. All core systems are now governed by a single governor instead of one per planet. So no longer will your empire leader pool consist of nothing but governors. This is a great thing. Governors now boost all pop resource production in sector they govern. So that's nice. So basically, if you have a governor in a sector, they will boost resource production. So this should offset the energy stuff from earlier a little bit, as well as the food, obviously. Interesting. Okay. Ascension perks. So Ascension perks is a Utopia-only feature. Master Builders now require 0 point power, which is the highest point version of power outside of enigmatic power, which you can only get through the Leviathans update. But gives mega engineering technology if you do not already have it, which you most likely do not, because it is relatively rare. So master builders, you'll be able to get mega engineering for free, except for, the one ascension point. And you need 0 point power. So you'll be able to get that into the late mid game. And then in combination, you get mega engineering technology automatically. So you can potentially immediately start building or at least refurbishing any sort of mega structures that you find, or start building your Dyson sphere, so to speak. The psionic and synthetic ascension paths are now available to all ethics, but cause massive ethic attraction towards spiritualist and materialist respectively. So you can basically, people are like, yo, I want to use mind bullets or turn myself into a robot. But it will change your entire population completely because of the ethics attractions shift, which is nice. Still, factions are still not a very well fleshed out system in my opinion, but still, that's something that we can talk about later. Buff the number of trait points that biological ascension gives, make the advanced traits cheaper, so you can have more of the advanced traits basically. So like the super brainiacs, or the completely insane stuff like I am literally made out of elephant. Reduce the effects of synthetic cyborg leaders and species traits. Interesting. We need to take a look at that, because cyborg leader, interesting. Yeah, because cyborg leaders, especially cyborg admirals, were better than synthetic admirals. So that kind of makes sense. Not entirely sure about... Oh, no, just in general, actually. Interesting. Very interesting. We'll need to take a look at that, what the changes are. Buff the effect of psionic leader and species traits. Okay, that makes sense. Psionic doesn't really do all that much. Here's the big one. For those that don't know, my opinion about Mastery of Nature has changed significantly since Utopia came out. But Mastery of Nature is now reduces the cost to clear blockers by 50%, rather making it free. It was arguably a little bit overpowered, even though a little bit situational. But still, you can no longer block everything for free. You will still get most of the blocker clearing technology, as far as I understand. Traditions. Tradition scaling costs are now reworked slightly. Cost per adopted group reduced from plus 10% to plus 5%, so you can get traditions quicker. Exponential cost already unlocked. The tradition increased from 1.6. That is oddly specific. 1.639. This means that traditions will be slightly more expensive early on, but slightly cheaper towards the end. I'm still of the opinion that you should only be able to unlock an X amount of traditions over a game unless you specifically aim for it. Obviously, due to the open-end style of Stellaris, this does not always apply, but still, I think that Civilization did a really good job with like the communism, democratic, and I think it was nationalism trees that you could have at the end of the game. Very cool stuff. I think like this could be handled by that as well. Science Division Tradition effect on leader skill has been replaced with a +1 resource option. Great. So basically, you would have been able to get better science leaders, but instead you get an additional research option. That's kind of crappy, especially for those that wanted to rush the discovery tree. Polytechnic Education Tradition effect on leader has also been replaced, but it gets a +33% leader experience gain. Maybe arguably better in the long term. Because leader experience gain does scale up to the highest levels, and it kind of makes sense with the additional leader levels that are being added to the game, where you can now have 10 levels instead of 5, so it does kind of make sense, I guess, to have a boost to leadership experience gain. Fleet Levies Tradition effect on Vassal naval capacity contribution increased from 20 to 50%. Wow. It's actually practical to have vassals now, because you will take half their fleet power. That is pretty insane, especially in a combination with the feudal lord civic. That's going to be pretty hardcore. Harmony Finisher effect on consumer goods replaced with increased influence from factions. So the consumer goods will still be just as expensive. You just get more influence from factions. However, considering sectors removal no longer costs influence, and you get more influence from other things, is this a good choice or not? Did the devs think there was not enough influence pool in the game? Interesting. Prosperity finisher effect on terraforming, cost replaced reduced with reduced. Okay, so instead of reducing terraforming, it reduces consumer goods. Which so prosperity finisher basically replaces the harmony finisher. Interesting. Faith and science now make assist research give a wow, a +1 unity per scientist skill level instead of +10% happiness. Yeah, faith and science was pretty overpowered. Instead of +10% happiness, increase +2% with the improved assist research per level. So this can go all the way up to +20 unity per scientist per improved assist research. That is pretty big. I'm not gonna lie. That is totally not abusable at all. I can see how you could have a fleet of scientists in ships just floating around. And especially in combination with governors in the core sectors only require 1 anymore instead of like a ton. You could make this overpowered as hell really quickly. Going through the expansion trees or the tradition trees in general. Expansion tree adopt bonus now increases colony development speed by 100% and giving you, instead of giving you new colonies and an additional free pop. It's an additional free pop. I'm sure this is a typo. But increased development speed is nice. I think it's 18 months by default, so having it being reduced to 9 is nice. Basically also because of the energy impact in the start of the game. A new life expansion tradition now gives new colonies an additional free... It's basically the same as the expansion edition. That is fascinating. So basically they merged expansion tradition adopt bonus into new life expansion plus all the stuff that was already in there. Standard construction templates prosperity tradition now increases the ship build speed and build speed by 50% instead of reducing their costs. Not entirely sure if I like this. Sure, being able to build ships faster is nice, but especially in the late game when the cost of ships gets ridiculous, that 50% was a pretty huge boon. Prosperity tradition adopt bonus now reduces ships build cost. Oh, okay. It's basically the same thing. Oh, wait, what? Hold on. Prosperity tradition adopt bonus now reduces ship build cost and building cost by 50%. Instead of reducing the cost of mining stations. Wow. Okay, then. Prosperity tradition is no longer the de facto go-to policy. That is crazy. Wow. So that's going to completely change my meta. Discovery tradition adopt bonus now increases anomaly discovery chance and decreases anomaly fail risk. Okay, that's actually really good. That is actually quite good. But again, they're very cheeky about this because normally you would get a reduction of cost on any sort of science stations. So all the reductions to science stations have been removed from the game through traditions. That is crazy town. This is in general quite good. More anomaly discovery chance is always good for those additional bonuses, but still, that is rough. To boldly go discovery tradition now increases survey speed and science ship chance to evade. Okay. Research agreements are no longer available for regular vassals due to stacking issues with domination finishers. Yeah, I remember that. Change Star-Lord's tradition from subject integration cooldown reduction to a plus 50%, plus 50 point subject trust cap. That's nice. So basically, they will revolt less easy, but the integration time cooldown reduction has been changed. So basically, instead of being able to integrate them sooner, they distrust you more for a longer period of time. But in combination with the which one was it? There was one of the ones that reduced the speed of integrating subjects. Yeah. Change vassal acculturation tradition from subject integration cost reduction to a plus 5% unity per subject up to 30%. Who is going to have 6 vassals? Who is going to have 6 vassals? Well, with the feudal lords, I guess everybody is. Courier network now gives you a minus 20% effect on colonies on tradition cost. Excuse me? Courier network gives a... okay, that's like the distance thing. Jesus Christ, there's a lot. Policies. AI rights policy is no longer about robots, but rather about sapience. Empires will have outlawed sapient AI can still research and build robots. That's nice. Synths are no longer disassembled under outlawed AI, but rather they are fitted with positron inhibitors that reduce research and energy production and disable happiness. They basically become normal robots. Synths are no longer enslaved under servitude AI, but they are fitted with, again, servitude protocols that reduce research production. Synths that have been given full citizen rights are now use far more consumer goods than their shackled brethren. Removed a number of policy restrictions on ethics, such as full AI rights now being available to all non-spiritualists. That is actually really nice. Materialists are no longer allowed to ban sapient AI, but they can still force them into servitude. That makes kind of sense, considering they're technology-based. All non-xenophile ethics can now make use of displacement-only purging. Interesting. Very interesting. So, unless you're a xenophile, you can purge by sending people away through displacement. Exploration. Anomalies will always have a failure risk of 5%. I wonder if this applies to the ancient empires, but yeah, it kind of makes sense. Like before if you have a leader that's strong enough, you would have a 0% fail risk pretty much all the time. Reworked anomaly fail risk to be completely based on an anomaly level and leader skill, so that a level 2 anomaly is always harder than a level 1. Makes sense. Miscellaneous. Increased empire mineral production from 5 to 10. I guess that's kind of where the stuff went for the reduction in cost for mining stations through traditions. Empire can now have a base income of 5. Enigmatic Fortress now drops either power core, shields, or both decoder and encoder. No numbers applied. Probably, from what I can remember from Twitter, it was 33% for each. But yeah, just getting a decoder or just an encoder would be a slap in the face. It's now 50% cheaper to resettle slaves in pops that are being purged. Hooray! So yeah. High and low gravity planet modifiers now also reduce habitability. That kind of makes sense. Planetary sensor range is now lower by default, but goes up by a fixed amount per sensor text, because previously I think it was a percentage. Artisans now only charge energy credits instead of minerals for their buildings and events. I think it was like 1,000 before for like the basic ones. Again, it makes sense. Why would they need minerals if they can spend it on stuff to, arts and craft, paper mache, that sort of thing. Patron of the Arts effect on Unity output reduced from plus 15% to minus 10%. That's annoying. That was the only thing that Patron of the Arts were good for anyway. Plantoids and fungoids no longer have any genders. Instead, they have 46. Genetic modification now has a base cost for the project regardless of how many pops are being modified. But cost per pop has been reduced, making modification of a large amount of pops more efficient than altering just a few of them. I could have sworn this was changed in Utopia as well. Rapid breeder effect now growth speed is increased by 5%. Slow breeder, same. Robust rate now gives a leader a 40-year lifespan rather than plus 30, so 10 more years. Whether or not that's a good thing is arguable. Delicious trait now only gives you a plus 50% food bonus from processing and livestock, as base was increased substantially. Interesting. Robot pop that build cost has changed from 100 energy, 50 minerals to just 100 minerals. That's really good considering minerals you have more than enough of in the mid-game. Energy is always the one that you're struggling with. Obviously, the cost is still there. Improved pre-Satian traits to be more useful overall. Terraforming liquids now give a 25% terraforming speed instead of reducing costs. So, okay. Lowered base cost of new spaceports to 300. The early game is going to be easier to live through if you have enemies, basically. Assembly Yard Spaceport Module no longer reduces the cost of their specific ship sizes, but rather increases their build speed by 33%, up from 25. Interesting. Stellar Shock, which is when you are invading a primitive species, now prevents species from growing new pop until it wears off, but it has a shorter duration. Unbidden and Scourge in the Crisis category are now a little bit less vulnerable to fleets that are hyper-specialized to counter them, though countering with the right weapons and the components will still have a large effect. That's good. Ethics Xenophile will now get a -25, -50% border friction modifier instead of a trust growth modifier. That's useful. It's basically the same thing. Although border friction can tick up to be pretty high, so it's probably not the same thing. Spiritualist Ethic now gets a -15, -30 unrest modifier instead of 10-20. These are all for the 2 variants, obviously. Fanatical Purifiers now have decreased pacifist ethics attraction, makes sense. Authoritarian now gives a +1, +0.5, +1 influence instead of resettlement cost reduction. That's probably good. Resettlement is not something that you use very often anyway. Authoritarian now gets a +5, +10% shield slave resource output. Interesting. But they will have more unrest from slaves. Pacifist now gives a +5, +10 pop resource production instead of unity. Oh, so all the idyllic stuff is completely broken now. Long period of peace, pacifist military ethics factor will no longer start ticking until game 50. Unless 50 years of the game have passed. I think it was 25 before. I'm not entirely sure. Significant tweaks and fixes to many aspects of ethics. How many of these are there? My God. How long is this video? 36. My Lord. Okay. Well, we continue on. Hope you're still with me. Yeah, we've gone through these. Factions increases. Embracing a faction now costs 500 influence, up from 250. Promoting a faction now costs 2+. Oh my God! Promoting a faction no longer increases their happiness, but impossible to do with faction with. My God! Increase the effectiveness of suppressing and promoting factions, but Jesus Christ! Flipping factions, sure, but that is pricey. Pops without full citizenship will now only contribute to faction of regular amount of support to factions they are part of. Reworked and fixed numerous factions issues to be clearer to understand that they have more sensible effects. Oligarchies now hold elections every 20 years instead of 45, 40 to 50. Hive Mind's authority now has a 50% resettlement cost reduction. Reduction number starting robots from 4 to 2. Okay, so mechanics will get less robots at the start of the game because they were pretty damn good for mining, let's put it that way. Non-devouring swarm hive minds are now able to keep pops as livestock. That's actually really cool. And it can also exterminate pops. Distinguished Admiralty Civic is now a +5% firing speed and a +5 evasion instead of an 8% firing speed. Still pretty good. Replaced the +20 unity for hive minds with a plus. That's garbage. That is total garbage. Hive minds need that unity. And a +2 sector cap, who cares? Aesthetic Civic is now 25% cooler, consumer cost reduction instead of 20. Environmental Civics with a, okay, yeah, wasteful. Devouring Trait and Fanatical Purifier can no longer be added or removed after the start of the game. Yeah, you could do that. Agrarian Idealism now requires Fanatic Pacifism. Inward Perfection has been reworked. Monthly output has been reduced from 30 to 20, but also increases citizen happiness +5. Empire Influence +1, and growth speed by 33%. Many diplomatic options are no longer possible with empires focusing on inward perfection. Devouring Swarms get a 25% hull point upgrade, up from 10. Syncretic Evolution Pro Species now have their own unique traits rather than using the generic pre-sapient ones, so you can actually change those. Increased base border projection of planets and frontier outposts, but capital planets no longer has a bonus to border projection even. Okay. So basically, you get more border projection in general. Raise the base cost to colonize planets and build frontier outposts to 100. Interesting. The cost is now reduced by technologies. So it's colonization of frontier outposts is always going to cost 100 influence regardless. That is annoying. I've had it as low as 15. Or 33, I think it's the base before. Private colony ships now cost the same amount of energy as a regular colony ship does in minerals. That makes sense. Doubled the spread of pop migration. Interesting. The speed of pop migration even. Pops that are being forced to migrate now always move faster. Habitats and ring worlds no longer give an influence cost to colonize them if they are inside your borders. That makes perfect sense. Psychor now produces 10 unity and boosts government ethics extraction. Ministry of Culture effect on unity has been increased by 4. And its effect on country has been our unity output has been reduced by 5%. So a bit of a bad payoff there. Art Monument has been reduced by 2. Paradise Dome, Cultural Center, and Xeno Zoo give citizen happiness instead of happiness. Not entirely sure what the details are. Temple and Monument are now mutually exclusive, but temples were significantly buffed. Frontier Clinic has been renamed to Gene Clinic. It will now be built on homeworlds as well as Gaia, Habitat, and Ring Worlds. A Frontier Hospital now named Cyto Revitalization Hospital and can be built on homeworlds as well as Gaia, Habitats, and Ring Worlds. The Xeno Zoo building has had its unity increased. Consecrated Worlds, which is one of the Ascension perks, which is only available to spiritualists. Effect on growth has been increased by 15%. Research grant edicts now give a 20% bonus in their chosen field and no penalty on any other field. Change encourage thought to encourage political thought, which increases the speed at which pops change their ethics. Interesting. So it's easier to flip stuff then. Free thought would give you a positive bonus to science output, but it would change the ethic distribution, I think. Tropical, continental, and ocean worlds are now more likely to have food society and mixed deposit. Arid savanna and desert worlds will now be more likely to have energy and physics deposit. Arctic, alpine, and tundra will now more likely to have mineral and engineering deposits. Basically, you'll be able to specialize your worlds a lot better. Gaia will now be rich in all resources. Gaia's will now give a 5% happiness to all biological pops living there. Reduce size of Mars to 13 from 15. Spiritualist Fallen Empire is now automatically psionic. Materialist Fallen Empires are now automatically cyborgs. And Materialist Fallen Empire are no longer opposed to robots. But they will have a focus on hoarding technology. We are now 42 minutes in. Research agreements now give a 25% research speed instead of a... God damn it, I did it again. One moment. It's my mouse. I really need to buy a new one. Yes. Instead of a 25% research cost reduction. This is very different. Tributary is now always protected. Reduce the influence cost of guarantees. That's actually kind of nice to get your initial trust up. Liberated empires will now refuse all offers to become subjects for 20 years after gaining independence. You used to be able to do it instantly, which was overpowered as hell. It was basically a case of first come, first serve. Liberated empires will now have a stronger governing ethics attraction modifier for the first 20 years of gaining independence. Recently enlightened primitive civilizations will get a large opinion bonus towards the empire that has enlightened them. It's like V, basically, or Earth Final Conflict. Synthetic leaders can now malfunction and break down. Okay, then. Scientists, specialists, traits will give a 15% research speed up from their speciality, up from 10%. So min-maxing your scientists becomes a bit more important. Nervous is now, once again, an admiral trait that reduces firing speed. Aggressive is now a 5% firing speed and 10%. We've already talked about this. No, that was one of the civics. Still, it's kind of good. 10% combat speed, though. Kind of annoying, especially if you have long-range weapons. Only component that can be reverse engineered and not currently being researched will now show up in debris. There will be no valid components to reverse engineer. If there are no valid components to reverse engineer, debris will not spawn at all. So you will no longer be able to get those science bonuses from debris. The amount of debris spawned from all battle can no longer be increased from splitting up your fleets. Oh yeah, I remember that bug. Automated exploration protocols no longer gives you plus survey speed, but instead unlocks the map of the stars edict, no longer being unlocked by the Global Research Initiative. I still think that automatic exploration should be a logical end to the discovery tree, but that's just me. Terrestrial sculpting will no longer show up until you have surveyed at least one planet that is not your home world. Interesting. Okay, that makes sense. Artificial morale codes. These are just all self-aware colony ship now will give you a minus 25% colony influence cost. Ascension theory is now a society tech. Interesting. Increase the cost of repeatable technologies. Reduce the requirement for number of research technologies in Tier 3 to unlock Tier 4 from 10 to 8. That's a really big deal, actually, to get to those late-game techs. Some point defense ship sections are now unlocked by flak battery technology and not just active countermeasures. Flak battery is fairly mid-game, though, from what I can remember. Tweak game ship combat behavior so the destroyers are more aggressive in moving forward to intercept enemy corvettes, strike craft, and missiles. So basically, they become your anti-small ships. Fallen Empires now have 4 point defense turrets instead of 2. Point defense are now far more reliable when it comes to shooting down missiles. Considerably increased speed of missiles, which in combination with the retargeting is a pretty big deal. Flak is now a point defense weapon specialized in taking out strike craft. It wasn't before? Jesus Christ, whiz. Swarmer and Whirlwind missiles will now be able to soak up a lot more damage from point defense. Okay. Strikecraft had their health, speed, and evasion majorly increased, and carriers will now continue to launch new waves of strikecraft during combat. Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, we have entered the missile carrier era. Species rights. Enslaved pops and robots who do not have citizen rights and will, that's decadent. It's not really important. Okay. Extermination goes quicker. Military stations, hit points have been increased extremely in hit points and damage output. We will put this to the test. No longer for regular empires to build military stations outside of their borders. Regular empires, so that does not count for like the Praetorian Scourge and the Unbidden. Passive observation now gives 5 society research instead of 3 and 8 versus 6. Ships in aggressive stance that are bombarding will no longer break orbit to chase after much smaller fleets. Yeah. Planetary fortifications will now be repaired even during bombardment at a slower rate than normal. Okay. Liberated empires will now start with a small fleet. Makes sense. Fleets that are... yeah, this is a good one. Fleets that are no longer set to aggressive stands will no longer engage unarmed orbital stations. So any sort of mining stations will no longer be engaged. Military fleets can no longer be set to evasive stands, which makes sense because normally they would just pop out of existence. Unbidden will no longer deploy every single fleet that they have to defend the portal against wandering to Janky. That's a good one. Okay, that's more of a bug. Significant work done to Unbidden and Swarm AI, so they no longer get stuck. Major work done to cooperation in endgame crises. Nice. Fallen robotic empires will now scoff at food trades. Major work has done to improve sector performance, particularly their ability to understand tile resources, food production, and when to replace buildings. This is going to be a thing in every single patch. Awakened empires will now use a mix of subjugation and conquest rather than only trying to conquer. Some AI personalities, such as fanatic purifiers, will now go after neutral targets like enclaves and uncontacted empires. That's actually a really big deal. So you'll need to defend enclaves from fanatic purifiers. AI will now retreat from battle in their home system unless they are down to just a few owned controlled planets. AI will no longer launch suicidal single ship attacks on enemies blockading its planets. Yes, please. Terraforming candidates will now show up in the expansion planner. Hallelujah. You can finally find them. Expansion planner now displays and can be sorted by the amount of strategic resources on planets. That's actually a big deal. I wish we had more strategic resources, to be honest. Planet and habitat outliner is now organized by which system they are, by which system planets are in, and is sorted in the distance by capital to capital. Age of Canada is now shown in election views. That's good. Total unity production and planetary view is good. There's a bunch of smaller stuff in there. Notifications from when you can talk to the Shroud again. You can now always see other empires' frontier outposts if you have communications with them. Unsurveyed planets are now colored orange to properly hide their habitability. Okay. Okay. Yeah, that makes sense. Before they were yellow, so that's actually really annoying. Because you could basically see, oh yeah, that planet, I wanna take a look at it because it's green. Therefore, we can take a look at that. More randomness. That's kind of cool. Traits and civics are now alphabetically sorted in the Empire setup. Thank God the game was completely unplayable because of this. Ambient sound loops in the background during crises grow stronger the more the galaxy the crisis conquers. Interesting. Very cool. User modding, I'm not really interested in that. Performances reduces lookup for ship database, misc optimization, and other stuff. Now there's bugs. There is a lot of them. We'll go through the highlights. Negative numbers for +2 million fleets are no longer there. Oh yeah, this is one that one of mine. Fix an exploit where initializers not meant for player empires, such as Fallen Empire Ringworlds, could be used as home systems through text editing. I am so sorry. On Thursday, you will no longer be able to play with those anymore. Deactivating buildings no longer prevents livestock and processing from producing food. Diplomatic greetings. Fleets are now capped at 500 ships. Okay, modifying a species, no able to join a federation if you've rivaled it. Oh yeah, Balderrock will now only spawn once. Okay, Sentinels will no longer spawn inside the Praetorian space. That's a good thing. For those that don't know, the Sentinels are a anti-Praetorian force that spawn after they take an X amount of the galaxy. Added a new event option for the Dathnak naming of their new homeworld Balderrock, if your species in fact is named Balderrock. Thanks devs, you think of everything. Blocked hive minds from getting neural implants tech. I knew how to do that. If FTL type is restricted, hyperlane modding, mapping technology is no longer available. Makes sense. Diplomatic stuff, numerous other tweaks and fixes. Yeah, quite a lot of stuff here. This video is now 52 minutes long, and here's a picture of all the types of robots that you'll be able to get with their skins and everything. So for the appearance, anyway, Synthetic Dawn will be coming out on Thursday, one moment, that is Thursday the 21st, which is Thursday that will follow up after the release of this video. So there you have it. It will be released for $10 and or local equivalent. So yeah, so looking at the stuff that's in here, even though most of them are fixes from the free patch, I think this is still going to be totally worth it. I think this is going to be absolutely worth it. A good price, a good pack, a lot of stuff is being done. I'm very excited for this one, and I hope you are as well. This has been a long one, 54 minutes. Until next time, take good care of yourselves and each other.